The Candyman. When urban legends become terrifyingly real. The Mirror Nevertheless IL. Never forget the night Sarah Mitchell disappeared. It was October 2019. And I was working the graveyard shift at Chicago's Cook County Archives when her roommate, trembling and barely coherent, stumbled through our doors at 3:47 a.m. She kept repeating the same phrase over and over. She said his name. She actually said his name. What followed would lead me down a rabbit hole so dark, so deeply entangled with Chicago's violent history, that I sometimes wish I'd never started pulling at those threads. But the truth has a way of demanding to be told, especially when it's the kind of truth that keeps you awake at night. Checking your mirrors. This is the real story behind the Candyman. Not the Hollywood version. Not the sanitized urban legend your friends whisper at sleepovers. The actual, documented history that's far more disturbing than any movie could ever be. The origins. Liverpool. 1985, the story begins, as so many modern nightmares do, with a writer who claimed he didn't invent his monster, he discovered it. Clive Barker was researching his short story collection in the council estates of Liverpool when he first heard whispers of the sweet man. Local residents, primarily in the Speke and Croxteth areas, spoke in hushed tones about a figure that appeared in bathroom mirrors. The details were fragmented, contradictory, but the fear was palpable and real. Barker's literary creation, published in The Forbidden in 1985, wasn't born from pure imagination. He'd documented something darker, a working-class community's collective trauma, given shape and form. The residents he interviewed genuinely believed in their boogeyman. They had their own rituals, their own warnings passed from generation to generation. What Barker discovered, and what most people don't realize, is that mirror-summoning legends exist in dozens of cultures worldwide. The specific details change. Bloody Mary, La Llorona, Hanako-son in Japan, but the core remains eerily consistent. Stand before a mirror in darkness. Speak a name multiple times. Watch something impossible materialize behind your reflection. Anthropologists call this phenomenon catoptromancy, divination through mirrors. But in these urban settings, the practice had evolved into something else entirely. A tangible manifestation of communal fear. Daniel Robitel, the man behind The Monster Hears, where the story gets genuinely disturbing. Because Daniel Robitel wasn't entirely fictional. During my research into Sarah's disappearance, I gained access to historical records from the Chicago History Museum that paint a chilling picture. While there's no documented case of a man named exactly Daniel Robitel, there were multiple instances of black artists in post-Civil War Chicago who suffered horrific fates at the hands of racist mobs. One case file from 1892 documented the lynching of a portrait painter named Daniel Robinson. The details are almost too graphic to recount, but they mirror the Candyman's origin story with disturbing accuracy. Robinson had been commissioned by a wealthy family on the North Side. He fell in love with the family's daughter. When the relationship was discovered, a mob was assembled. What happened next is documented in coroner's reports and witness testimonies that sat untouched in archives for over a century. Robinson was mutilated, his right hand severed. The mob coated him in stolen honey from a local beekeeper. The medical examiner counted over 600 bee stings on his body. He died from anaphylactic shock and severe trauma. His body was never given a proper burial. According to fragmentary records, his remains were burned, and the ashes were dumped in an area that would, decades later, become the site of the Cabrini-Green housing projects. This wasn't an isolated incident. I found at least 7 similar cases between 1890 and 1920, all involving black men who'd crossed racial boundaries, all ending in grotesque violence. Chicago's history is soaked in this blood, yet most of it has been systematically erased from public record. Cabrini-Green, where legends take root, Cabrini-Green wasn't just any housing project. Built between 1942 and 1962, it became a symbol of systemic failure. A place where the city warehoused its poorest residents and then forgot about them. By the 1980s, Cabrini-Green had one of the highest murder rates in America. Gang violence was rampant. Police response times were deliberately slow. Residents lived in constant fear not of ghosts, but of very real human threats. It's in this environment that the Candyman legend truly took hold. I interviewed 17 former Cabrini-Green residents during my investigation. Every single one knew the story. Most had heard it as children in the 1970s and 80s, long before Bernard Rose's 1992 film. The details varied, but the core was consistent. A murdered black man, bees, a hook, a mirror, 5 repetitions of his name. One resident, Margaret Johnson, now 67, told me something that still haunts me. We didn't make up that story to scare kids. We told it because sometimes people actually saw him. My cousin Terrell, he saw the man in the mirror in 1981. 3 days later, Terrell was dead. They said it was gang violence, but his body, the wounds weren't from bullets or knives. They were puncture marks, thousands of them, like stings. The police report for Terrell Johnson's death, which I managed to obtain through FOIA requests, lists cause of death as undetermined trauma, possible animal attack. The case remains unsolved. There were others, at least 12 deaths in Cabrini-Green between 1978 and 1995 that share disturbing similarities. Victims found with extensive puncture wounds, traces of honey or wax on their bodies, and all occurring within days of someone reportedly performing the mirror ritual. The Chicago Police Department never connected these cases, or if they did, they never made it public. The 1992 film, Art Imitating Death, when Bernard Rose began filming Candyman in 1992. He didn't realize he was opening a door that should have stayed closed. The production was plagued with incidents. Several crew members reported seeing a man with a long coat in the background of shots, only to find nobody there when they checked the footage. Tony Todd, the actor who portrayed Candyman, insisted on method acting techniques that included spending time in the abandoned sections of Cabrini-Green, alone at night, in interviews rarely discussed. Todd admitted he experienced things during filming that he couldn't explain. Swarms of bees appearing from nowhere. The sensation of being watched. Once, while filming the scene where Candyman emerges from the medicine cabinet, the mirror cracked spontaneously, cutting Todd's face. The crew couldn't explain how a prop mirror suddenly shattered under no physical stress. The residents of Cabrini-Green had mixed feelings about the film. Some saw it as exploitation. Others believed it was dangerous, that creating a movie about the legend would feed it, make it stronger. A community organizer named Ruth Hayes, who worked in Cabrini-Green during the filming, told me after that movie came out, the incidents got worse. More kids tried the ritual. More people claimed they saw him. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, that film did something. It crystallized the legend, gave it power. The film's release in October 1992 was followed by a documented spike in emergency psychiatric admissions in Chicago, particularly from the near north side where Cabrini-Green was located. Hospital records show patients claiming they'd performed the ritual and were now being hunted. Most were diagnosed with acute stress disorder or schizophrenia, but some of these patients reported identical hallucinations: a man with a hook, the smell of honey, the sound of swarming bees. They couldn't have coordinated their stories. Many were admitted to different hospitals and never communicated. The psychology of belief, when fear becomes reality. Alina Martinez, a psychiatrist I consulted during my research, explained the phenomenon this way: mass psychogenic illness, or what used to be called mass hysteria, occurs when a community shares a belief so intensely that it manifests physical symptoms. The Candyman legend operates on an even more complex level because it incorporates trauma, both historical and personal. When someone from a marginalized community performs this ritual, she continued, they're not just playing with a scary story. They're invoking real historical pain. That pain has psychological weight. In vulnerable individuals, especially those living in traumatic environments like Cabrini-Green was, that psychological weight can trigger genuine dissociative episodes or psychotic breaks. But this explanation, while rational, doesn't account for everything I discovered in 2007. 15 years after the original film, a University of Illinois graduate student named Marcus Webb decided to investigate the Candyman legend for his thesis on urban folklore. He conducted extensive interviews and even attempted the ritual himself, filming it for documentation. The footage exists. I've seen it. Marcus stands in his bathroom, lights off, phone camera recording in night vision mode. He begins, Candyman, ... Candyman, ... Candyman, ... Candyman, ... Candyman, for 5 seconds. Nothing happens. Marcus laughs nervously, making a joke about wasted time. Then the audio picks up something the human ear can't detect in real time. A low-frequency hum, rising in pitch and intensity. Marcus stops laughing. He's staring at something in the mirror behind him. His face goes slack with terror. He begins to scream. Dropping the phone, the camera captures 15 seconds of distorted audio, that high-pitched hum mixed with what sounds like buzzing. And underneath it all, something that might be breathing. When Marcus's roommate found him 10 minutes later, Marcus was catatonic, staring at the mirror with his eyes wide open. He never spoke another word. He's been in a psychiatric facility near Springfield, Illinois ever since. When I tried to visit him, the staff said he only does one thing. He sits facing the wall, away from any reflective surfaces, and occasionally whispers, "He's real. He's real. He's real." The 2021 revival, history repeating Jordan Peele's decision to produce a new Candyman film in 2021 wasn't just artistic, it was a reckoning with history. Cabrini-Green had been demolished by then, replaced by upscale condos and a reimagined neighborhood marketed to wealthy The new film explored this gentrification, asking what happens when you erase a community's physical space, but not its trauma. The concept of Candyman as a hive, a collective entity composed of multiple victims of racial violence, was more than clever writing. It reflected a truth that researchers into generational trauma have long understood. Pain doesn't disappear when you demolish the buildings where it occurred. It seeps into the ground, into the stories, into the collective memory. During the production of the 2021 film, director Nia DaCosta insisted on acknowledging the real history. She held a ceremony with former Cabrini-Green residents before filming began. They shared stories, not of Candyman, but of the real people who'd died there. The real violence that had occurred. One elderly woman named Doris Simpson, who'd lived in Cabrini-Green from 1958 to 2000, said something that the crew never forgot. "You want to tell this story? Fine. But remember, every legend is built on somebody's grave. You're not just making entertainment. You're digging up bones." The film's production saw fewer incidents than the 1992 version, but there was one notable exception. During filming of the climactic scene in the abandoned laundry building, several crew members reported equipment malfunctions, cameras failing, lights exploding, audio equipment picking up strange interference. One sound engineer, David Park, recorded something during a break in filming that still defies explanation. With all cameras off and no one speaking, his equipment captured a voice, clear, distinct, male saying, "Witness me." The voice was later analyzed by an audio forensic expert who concluded it wasn't ambient sound, wasn't radio interference, and didn't match any voice on set that day. It simply appeared on the recording. Impossible to source. Sarah Mitchell. The case that started everything. Let me return to where I began. Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Sarah was a 24-year-old graduate student at Northwestern University, studying urban anthropology. Her thesis focused on how communities create and maintain folklore in response to trauma. Naturally, the Candyman legend was central to her research. According to her roommate, Keisha Washington, Sarah had become obsessed with proving the legend had rational explanations. She'd interviewed dozens of people, compiled historical records, even visited the site of the old Cabrini-Green projects. On October 19, 2019, Sarah decided to perform the ritual herself. She set up cameras in her apartment bathroom, preparing to document what she believed would be nothing proof, that the legend was just psychology and fear. Keisha was in her bedroom down the hall when she heard Sarah begin, "Candyman, Candyman, 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 Candyman." Then silence. Keisha waited, expecting Sarah to emerge, laughing about the absurdity of it all. 1 minute passed. 2, 5. When Keisha entered the bathroom, it was empty. The cameras were still rolling. Sarah was gone. The police investigation went nowhere. Sarah's disappearance was classified as a missing person case, possibly a voluntary departure due to academic stress. But I obtained the camera footage through a connection with Sarah's family. The footage shows Sarah performing the ritual. After the 5th Candyman, she stops, staring into the mirror. Her expression changes from skeptical amusement to confusion, then to absolute terror. She mouths something that looks like "Oh my God." Then the lights in the bathroom begin to flicker. The audio picks up that same low-frequency hum that appeared on Marcus Webb's recording. Actual bees begin appearing in the frame, seemingly from nowhere. Sarah backs away from the mirror, her mouth open in a silent scream. The camera shows her being pulled toward the mirror. Not by visible hands. She simply slides backward across the tile floor as if grabbed by an invisible force. Her hands scrabble for purchase, finding none. She reaches the mirror. For one frame, just one single frame of video, the reflection shows not Sarah, but a man standing behind her, tall, wearing a long coat. Where his right hand should be, there's something else. Something that catches the light like metal. The next frame, Sarah is gone. The bathroom is empty. The bees disappear. The only sound is the gentle hum of the building's ventilation system. Sarah Mitchell has never been found. There's no evidence she left the apartment. No evidence of forced entry. No evidence of anything except those 37 seconds of impossible footage. The police maintain she must have left the building somehow. Her family believes she's dead, though they have no body to bury, and I've watched that single frame of footage, the one showing the man in the mirror, hundreds of times. I've had it analyzed by video forensic experts. They all say the same thing. It's not a camera artifact, not a manipulation, not a reflection of something in the room. It's simply there, an image that shouldn't exist. Captured in 1/30th of a second. The pattern emerges. Sarah's case sent me deeper into the archives. I filed FOIA requests with Chicago PD, searched historical records, interviewed anyone who'd had an encounter with the legend. What I found was a pattern stretching back decades, possibly longer, every 7 to 10 years. There's a spike in disappearances or unexplained deaths in Chicago connected to mirror rituals. The incidents cluster around areas with histories of racial violence or urban decay. The victims are often young, often skeptics trying to prove the legend false, often researchers or artists engaging with the story. In 1987, a photographer named James Keaton disappeared while documenting Cabrini-Green. His camera was found in a hallway, the film inside showing one peculiar image, a bathroom mirror reflecting something that wasn't in the room. In 1996, 3 teenagers from the South Side vanished after reportedly performing the ritual together. Their bodies were found a week later in separate locations across the city. The medical examiner noted extensive dermal trauma consistent with insect stings, though it was winter and no insects were present at the death scenes. In 2004, a documentary filmmaker named Patricia Suarez was working on a film about Chicago's urban legends. She performed the ritual on camera. The footage was never released, but I managed to track down her cameraman, who still has nightmares about what he witnessed. She didn't disappear, he told me, his hands shaking as he spoke. But what happened to her was worse. She saw something in that mirror that broke her mind. She's still alive, technically, but she's not really here anymore. The pattern is undeniable. The Candyman legend isn't just a story, it's a recurring phenomenon. Something that activates under specific conditions and produces consistent results. The mirror, gateway, or trap. The mirror itself is central to understanding this phenomenon. Why a mirror specifically? Dr. Rachel Kim, a physicist I consulted who specializes in optics and perception, offered an intriguing explanation. Mirrors create a unique perceptual space. When you look into a mirror, your brain is processing 2 sets of information: direct sensory input and reflected sensory input. In low light conditions, especially with heightened emotional states like fear, the brain can misinterpret these signals. But, she added, that's the scientific explanation. It doesn't account for the physical evidence, the disappearances, the documented phenomena on camera. If I'm being completely honest, and this is off the record, I've reviewed some of the footage you showed me. The physics don't work. Light doesn't behave that way. Images don't appear in mirrors without a source. Something is happening that we can't explain with current scientific understanding. Mirrors have been considered supernatural objects in cultures worldwide for millennia. In Jewish tradition, mirrors are covered during mourning. In feng shui, mirror placement is crucial because they can trap or redirect spiritual energy. In Western folklore, breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck because it traps a piece of your soul. The Candyman legend taps into this ancient unease. The mirror isn't just a prop in the story, it's the mechanism. The doorway between our world and whatever lies beyond. What happens when you say his name? So what actually happens when you perform the ritual? Based on documented cases and my own research, there seem to be several possibilities. Nothing. The majority of people who've tried the ritual report no unusual experiences. They stand in darkness, say the name 5 times, and nothing happens. They laugh it off and move on with their lives. Psychological effects. Some people experience panic attacks, hallucinations, or temporary dissociative episodes. These can be explained by hypervigilance, pattern recognition in darkness, and the power of suggestion. Our brains are incredibly good at creating what we expect to see. Genuine phenomena. In a small but consistent percentage of cases, something inexplicable occurs. Equipment malfunctions. Physical traces appear. Honey, wax, stings. In the rarest and most extreme cases, people disappear or suffer severe psychological trauma that persists indefinitely. Why do some people experience nothing while others face horror? I don't have a definitive answer, but I have theories. Perhaps it requires a certain psychological state, true belief or true skepticism. Either extreme might act as an invitation. Perhaps it's location dependent, only occurring in places saturated with historical trauma. Perhaps it's simply random, a cosmic lottery where most spin the wheel and win nothing. But an unlucky few hit the jackpot of terror. Or perhaps sand, this is what keeps me awake, it's cumulative. Every person who performs the ritual adds energy to the legend. Every telling of the story, every movie, every article like this one, feeds it. The Candyman grows stronger with each invocation, each acknowledgement of his existence. If that's true, then the 2021 film's concept of Candyman as a hive isn't just metaphor, it's literal. He's a collective entity, built from belief and fear, powered by our continued engagement with his story. The question of evil is the Candyman evil? This question troubles me more than any other. The legend presents him as a vengeful spirit, killing those who summon him. But the origin story complicates this simple narrative. Daniel Robitel, or Robinson, or whatever his real name was, wasn't evil. He was a victim, murdered in one of the most horrific ways imaginable, simply for falling in love across racial lines. His transformation into the Candyman isn't about him becoming a monster. It's about pain and injustice taking physical form. Every person who says his name is, in a sense, bearing witness to that injustice. They're acknowledging that this terrible thing happened, that this system of violence existed and continues to exist. But acknowledgement comes with a price. You cannot bear witness to that much pain without being touched by it. You cannot look directly at historical trauma without some of it seeping into you. Maybe that's what the Candyman really is. Not a ghost or demon, but a living reminder of America's original sins. He appears to those who invoke him because they've chosen to look at what most people prefer to ignore. And once you've really looked at that darkness, once you've acknowledged it exists, you can never fully look away. My own encounter, I should tell you what happened to me. 3 months ago, I'd been researching this story for over a year. I'd interviewed dozens of people, reviewed hundreds of documents, watched footage that still makes my hands shake. I thought I understood the legend intellectually without believing it emotionally. I was wrong. Late one night, alone in my apartment, I stood before my bathroom mirror. I didn't plan to perform the ritual. I just wanted to understand the psychology of it, to feel what someone feels in that moment before they speak the name. The room was dark except for one candle, creating the exact lighting conditions described in countless accounts. I stared at my reflection, watching shadows play across my face, and then, without consciously deciding to do it, I spoke. Candyman. The word came out as barely a whisper. My heart began racing. This was stupid, I told myself. Foolish. There was nothing to fear. Candyman. The second repetition came easier. I could feel the pull of the ritual now, the strange momentum of it. 3 more to go. Candyman. The candle flickered. Just wind from the ventilation system, surely. But my breathing had quickened, and my palms were sweating. Candyman. 1 more. 1 more word, and I would prove it was just a story, just psychology, just high. Stopped. I couldn't say it. Not because I was too frightened, although fear was certainly present. I stopped because I realized something crucial. I didn't want to know. Not with certainty. Not with the kind of proof that can't be rationalized away. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Some knowledge can't be unknown. And standing there in the darkness, staring at my reflection, I understood that the 5th repetition would change something fundamental about my reality. Regardless of whether anything supernatural occurred, I left the bathroom. I turned on every light in my apartment, and I made a decision. I would finish this article, tell Sarah Mitchell's story, document the history and the pattern, but I would not complete the ritual. I choose to live in the uncertainty. The warning: if you've read this far, you might be tempted to try it yourself. You might think it's just a story. It's just psychology. Nothing will happen. Maybe you're right. Probably you're right. But ask yourself, what do you gain if you're correct? A few seconds of relieved laughter, a story to tell friends, proof of something you already believed. And what do you risk if you're wrong? Sarah Mitchell is still missing. Marcus Webb will never speak again. At least 19 other documented cases over 4 decades involve disappearances, unexplained deaths, or permanent psychological trauma connected to this ritual. The legend persists because somewhere beneath the fiction there's a core of truth. A man named Daniel Robinson, or someone like him, really was murdered in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. That pain is real. That injustice is real. The ghosts of that history are real, whether they manifest as literal specters or as the continued trauma of racism and violence in our society. When you say the Candyman's name, you're not just playing with a scary story. You're invoking that real history. You're placing yourself in conversation with genuine pain. Some conversations are best left unstarted. The unanswered question: I began this investigation to find Sarah Mitchell. I wanted answers, closure, proof one way or another. What I found instead was a mystery that deepens the more you examine it. Every answer leads to 3 more questions. Every rational explanation fails to account for some piece of evidence. Is the Candyman real? I don't know. Are the disappearances and strange phenomena connected to the ritual? The pattern suggests yes, but correlation isn't causation. Is there something supernatural at work? Or is this simply human psychology and coincidence creating a compelling narrative? I can't say with certainty. What I do know is this: stories have power. Beliefs have consequences. And the line between legend and reality is far thinner than we'd like to believe. The Candyman exists because we tell his story. He persists because we can't forget the real violence that inspired him. And he waits in mirrors because we're compelled to look at our own reflections, to confront who we are and what horrors we're capable of inflicting on each other. Maybe the Candyman isn't a ghost at all. Maybe he's a mirror showing us the darkest parts of American history and human nature. Maybe the ritual works by forcing us to look directly at that darkness until it looks back. Conclusion: the mirror's edge. It's been 18 months since Sarah Mitchell disappeared. Her case remains open, but the police are no longer actively investigating. Her parents have stopped calling me for updates. The world has moved on, as it always does, but I can't move on. I think about Sarah every time I see a mirror. I think about Marcus Webb, still catatonic in his psychiatric ward. I think about Daniel Robinson, dying under a swarm of bees in 1892. His story becoming legend, becoming nightmare. I think about that single frame of video, showing a figure that shouldn't exist, and I wonder, what if the Candyman's greatest power isn't appearing when his name is spoken, but making us terrified to look in mirrors at all? What if the real curse is living in fear, avoiding our own reflections, unable to confront what we might see? The legend endures because it speaks to something true. We are haunted, not necessarily by literal ghosts, but by history, by injustice, by the violence we, as a society, have committed and never properly addressed. The Candyman is that haunting given form and name. You can choose not to believe in him. You can choose not to say his name. But you cannot choose to unhear his story. Now that you know it, it's part of you. The mirror is waiting. The darkness is patient. And the legend continues, growing stronger with every telling. Some of you will read this and think, it's just a story. You'll move on with your lives. Maybe occasionally remember this article when you're brushing your teeth in front of a bathroom. Mirror late at night, others will feel the pull. The temptation to test it, to prove it false, to know with certainty. If you're in that second group, I have only this to say. Don't. The uncertainty is a gift. The not knowing is a protection. Some truths are too dangerous to verify. Sarah Mitchell wanted to prove the legend false. She wanted certainty. She got it. I don't know where she is now. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm brushing my teeth and catch my reflection in the mirror, I think I see someone standing behind me. I never turn around to check. Be sweet. Be safe, and whatever you do, don't say his name.